This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed.
The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Spears.
We are kicking off with two big stories from the last sitting week of federal parliament of the year. And there's a bit to get across internationally.
Yeah, including that shocking apartment fire in Hong Kong. We also have some good news on the fight to eliminate cervical cancer in Australia. And you're off to see Gaga.
I am. We will get into it a bit later. Let's do it.
Let's go.
Jodie, how are you on your feet? Are you hiding any twinkle toes over there?
Look, traditionally I was more of a gymnast than a dancer, but that was quite handy because I could still star in the dance shows by pulling out a few backflips.
Okay.
Which is what everyone, well, it's a good party trick to pull out. So I could hide my mediocre dancing abilities.
So
not
for
great.
anyone watching this on YouTube, is there a backflip? You can, got a pretty tight
My back
studio.
would probably give out these days, but I could go into training if you really like.
Well, I think we should get you into training because that's something I'd like to see. Curious, of course, because Robert Irwin won Dancing with the Stars in the United States this week, 10 years after his sister Bindi took home the same title. The Irwins are now a dancing dynasty, it seems.
Apparently, who would have thought when they were up at Australia Zoo in their car keys? He was up against some pretty stiff competition in the finale as well. Olympic gymnast Jordan Childs was in it, Zac Efron's brother Dylan, and a TikTok influencer called Alex Earl. It was the closest result in the show's history, but he took out that glitter ball trophy with a pretty debilitating rib injury.
Yeah, I saw some interviews with him saying breathing was really hard, and in his training he had to stop a lot because it was just so painful. He said that if he pushed his body any harder, he would have broke.
And this is a guy who deals with Crocs.
Yeah, exactly. He's not
a wuss.
Yeah, exactly right. The audience votes got him over the line. It was a pretty tight result, but it seems that Americans just adore him, as so many Aussies do as well. The New York Times actually wrote a really glowing profile on him. They say he has this sort of brand of positive masculinity. He got pretty emotional after the win. He said that he wished his dad, Steve, could have been there to see it.
Yeah, he just seems like a lovely, I was about to say a lovely kid, but he's not a kid
anymore.
Not a kid anymore,
yeah.
There's a great photo of Robert and Bindi holding their trophies, both of them, with their mum, Terry. And the crocodile hunter, I think, would have been so proud of them. So we'll pop a link to one of his final dances and that piece in the New York Times into the episode notes for you to enjoy.
On to the biggest story, or should we say stories of the week coming out of federal parliament for that last sitting week of the year. Two big things really emerged: Labor's deal with the Greens and also Barnaby Joyce quitting the Nationals. We'll start with the Albanese Government getting its environmental law reforms through with support from the Greens.
Yeah, this issue has been stuck for years. Reforms to the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, or EPBC for short, slightly easier.
It's a good Canberra acronym.
Sure is. It's the legislation that governs approvals for major projects in housing, mining, energy, and it also sets protections for our flora and fauna, particularly threatened species. It's been widely recognised as not being fit for purpose for a good 5 years. No one thought what was in place was actually serving the interests of business or the environment, so they need to change.
Yeah, and the government has actually tried to change it before. Last year, Tanya Plibersek, who was the Environment Minister before the election, had a crack at it, but Prime Minister Anthony Albanese pulled the plug amid some really fierce resistance from the business groups and also from WA Premier Roger Cook, who was facing a state election at the time. Albanese also doesn't like Plibersek very much, so there was no love lost there.
Yeah, that's a rivalry that goes back decades. So after the May election, Albanese appointed Murray Watt as the Environment Minister with the brief of fixing it. He's done a lot of stakeholder management and the timeline that they had was really ambitious.
Yeah, so Treasurer Jim Chalmers, of course, had that economic roundtable in August, and part of the results of that was to commit to pass this legislation by the end of this year because, of course, it streamlines some of those approval processes, and that economic roundtable is all about making things more efficient on that front. So the pressure was really on Murray Watt to get the deal done. Watt was negotiating with both the Greens and the Coalition right up until the last minute.
Yeah, we really didn't know which way it was going to go. Just to unpack that, on Wednesday morning, Albanese met with Greens leader Larissa Waters and their environment spokesperson Sarah Hanson-Young in his office. The sticking point was forestry. The Greens wanted new environmental standards to apply to regional forestry agreements within 6 months, but Labor's version had 3 years.
Yeah, so this is about the effective end of commercial native forest logging in Australia, and in the end they agreed on an 18-month phase-in period, so they sort of split the difference.
Compromise.
Yeah, Thursday morning Albanese announced the deal in a press conference in his courtyard. You will be very familiar with that. I'm sure you've been to many a press conference in the Prime Minister's courtyard. He did that with his own ministers, not with the Greens.
Yeah, so it's an important point to clock there. Albanese isn't much of a fan of the Greens personally. He's from the left of Labor and often in his own seat. And for the candidates that he supports, they're in fierce competition against the Greens. There's another risk for Labor in this deal as well, and that's the loss of forestry and timber jobs.
Yeah, there's a $300 million support package when it comes to supporting those timber and forestry workers who will lose their jobs as a consequence of that logging being phased out. Made me reflect, Jodie, on the 2004 election campaign.
21 years ago now.
Wow, yeah, and that's really a confronting timeline. Forestry played a really pivotal and very controversial role in that election campaign, particularly in Tasmania.
Yeah.
It contributed really significantly to John Howard's victory. Mark Latham was the Labor leader who he was up against in those days. Latham came out with a commitment in the campaign to end old growth forestry logging. Howard said, that's anti-jobs. And Tasmania agreed.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. There was this key moment where Howard visited the region to announce that he would fight tooth and nail to see Latham's plan defeated. And he was hugged by unionists and timber workers who were essentially Labor voters.
Yeah, and look, it just goes to this sort of broader point, I guess, and why it's relevant now. There is this ongoing tension between Labor's environmental credentials and also its ties to the Labor movement. So, look, I really love revisiting these moments, so thank you for the indulgence. What has changed now, though, compared to 2004? I did a bit of reading on this. Apparently our timber industry has changed quite a bit. It's in decline, but where it is operational, it's focused on plantation forestries, not on native forests.
Right. As for the coalition, there were signals that Labor was actually leaning towards a deal with the coalition there for a while this week. Business groups were pushing the coalition to get it done and to keep the Greens out of it. But according to Watt, the coalition kept adding new demands.
Yeah, he said that every time he had a meeting, they told him, here's our final list of amendments, and then a few hours later more amendments would arrive. He accused them of not really knowing what they wanted. I also saw David Gazard, who was quite a well-known Liberal staffer from days gone by. He also ran as a candidate for the Liberals. He's now a lobbyist. He said he was working for some clients who had a real interest in these laws being changed. He said that when he was talking to the coalition to try and, work out what their position was, they didn't really have a position. They weren't firm enough in exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, sounds a bit chaotic. So the coalition just got caught on the hop there, basically. For her part, Liberal leader Susan Lee called it a dirty agreement and claimed that the government had always intended to deal with the Greens. Whether they can get some political advantage out of highlighting that Labor-Greens alliance or not is a question. The other big story out of federal politics this week, Barnaby Joyce quitting the Nationals after 30 years with the party.
Yeah, he's a former leader of the party, of course, which makes it even more significant. Wasn't much of a surprise, though, but he announced it in a speech to Parliament on Thursday, the very last sitting day of the year. The new angle, I guess, to this, he said that he had been asked to leave Parliament twice by former Liberal leader Peter Dutton. Dutton said, yep, I did, but we were really concerned about his health. And remember, there's been a cancer scare and also that incident where he collapsed on a footpath. That was definitely something from recent times.
Yeah, that involved medication and alcohol from memory. Joyce also took aim at current Nationals leader David Littleproud, saying that apart from a 90-second phone call 5 weeks ago when he first announced that he wouldn't recontest his seat, there's been no further communication between them.
And look, whether Joyce would have picked up the phone and had a more lengthy conversation, I guess, is another thing. Joyce says that he's strongly considering running for a one-nation Senate seat in New South Wales at the next election. He had a very publicised dinner this week with Pauline Hanson, who's the One Nation leader, in her office. Pasta salad and steak. The steak was made in the sandwich press.
It doesn't sound very appetising, does it? Reminds me of a workplace where the security guard used to cook his eel in the sandwich press.
Oh, God.
So none of us used it after that.
No.
The departure leaves the coalition with just 42 members in the 150-seat House of Reps, and there are concerns that it could cost them not just his seat of New England at the next election, but potentially a New South Wales Senate spot if Joyce successfully runs for One Nation there and takes one of the Nationals' seats.
Yeah, I reckon for Susan Lee, the Christmas break could not come soon enough.
Absolutely.
On to 3 other stories that we've been talking about this week. There's been a bit to get across in the geopolitical space. We've got Donald Trump front and centre. He's mediating more international disputes.
Yeah, for someone who is America first, he's been very busy dealing with various foreign conflicts which don't even directly involve the US. Let's start with the Russia-Ukraine peace deal. This is one that Trump's been desperate to broker for months.
Yeah, late last week and into the weekend, there was talk that an agreement was very close after Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff met with the Russians. They drew up a 28-point peace plan. There's been concern that Ukraine hasn't been included in that part of the process.
Yeah, understandably. So leaders from Ukraine and Europe then worked on their own 19-point plan. It pushed back on certain elements of the American and Russian proposal, including a cap on the size of Ukraine's military and the fast removal of economic sanctions on Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin says what they've come up with could be the basis for an agreement. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, look, what goes on behind the scenes to set the stage for these sort of peace deals, potential peace deals, we rarely get to see what goes into making that sausage. Bloomberg News this week got its hands on a really juicy leak. They got their hands on a transcript of a phone call between Witkoff, the US Special Envoy, and an official from the Kremlin called Yuri Ushakov. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, this was a conversation from October 14 when Donald Trump was getting ready to meet Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House. Witkoff suggested to Ushakov that they should get Putin and Trump on the phone before that meeting with Zelensky went ahead, and he seemed to be coaching Ushakov on how Putin should deal with Trump and talk to him.
They suggested Putin should start off congratulating Trump on the Gaza peace deal.
Surprise, surprise.
Praise him for being a man of peace, and then sort of pitch something similar for the Ukraine war. The conversation was very friendly in tone. Ushakov repeatedly calls Witkoff my friend. Witkoff talks about having the deepest respect for President Putin.
Yeah, this raised some eyebrows and some concerns about Witkoff's impartiality, with commentators saying that it really looked like he was favouring Russia. Trump defended him, though. He says that he was simply doing what deal makers do and that he probably speaks in a similar way to Ukraine. As you said, we don't usually get glimpses of this, so we don't necessarily know what goes into making the deals.
And I'm really fascinated by Witkoff as well. He's not a diplomat. He doesn't come out of the usual channels that diplomats come through. He's a guy who was a lawyer in real estate. He met Donald Trump. I remember reading an account. It was like 1986. He was a lawyer and encountered him in a deli in New York, like at 3 a.m. in the morning, and Trump didn't have any money, so Witkoff bought him a ham sandwich.
And they were mates for life.
And they were mates for life. And coming through his career, essentially, he's been working in real estate in New York.
He's used to doing deals.
He's used to doing deals, and that's why Trump has him on board. Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law are another wheeler and dealer when it comes to property, Jared Kushner. They're travelling to Moscow to meet with Putin this week. They're the duo who negotiated the ceasefire in Gaza. So, look, fingers crossed that they could do something similar for Ukraine.
Yeah, we've seen it happen before. The second part now in our Geopolitics roundup this week, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping had a phone call, and there's a simmering feud between China and Japan to get across. This has been brewing ever since Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi told Parliament earlier this month that if China invaded Taiwan, Japan may intervene militarily to help defend Taiwan. China accused Japan of provocation, and things really escalated from there.
Yeah, so China's brought in trade bans against Japan. It's sent its Coast Guard to patrol the contested islands that are in that region, because we've talked about the South China Sea quite a bit. This is the region that this is all playing out in. It's claimed, of course, by both countries, so very contentious. It's warned its citizens not to travel to Japan. Beijing wants Takaichi to retract her comments. She won't do that.
No. According to China's foreign ministry, Xi told Trump that Taiwan's return to China was an integral part of the post-war international order. They're standing very firmly on their position. And China urged the US to help maintain that world order. Trump didn't mention Taiwan publicly, but he called Takaichi a few hours later.
Yeah, she said that Trump briefed her on his call with Xi that they've confirmed a very close US-Japan relationship. Trump apparently told her that he was a very close friend and that she could call him anytime. It's just one of those things. How many times can Xi say that he is going to take Taiwan before something like that actually happens? It's certainly something that people watching this very closely say is in the future.
Yeah, absolutely brewing. While we are discussing news out of Asia this week, we thought we should also go to the inferno at that Hong Kong apartment complex that really captured the world's attention this week. Brought back memories for me of the Grenfell Tower fire in London.
Yeah, there's something really terrifying, isn't there, of watching flames go up apartment blocks like that and just being these candles, essentially. Scores of people have been confirmed dead, 83 as we record, about 270 people still missing. That blaze broke out on Wednesday afternoon local time. The pictures are really shocking. Multiple high-rise buildings engulfed by these flames. It took many, many hours and hundreds of firefighters to try and get these things under control.
Yeah, Hong Kong is that classic example of high-density living. These apartments were in a complex called Wang Fuk Court. It's in northern Hong Kong, sort of closer up towards Shenzhen than the central part of Hong Kong that lots of people would have visited. There are 8 towers in the complex. They're all 31 stories high. What really struck me looking at the pictures was how close they all are to each other, how easily a fire like this would spread. There are about 2,000 apartments all up, and 7 of the 8 towers in that complex all
went
were
up
on
in
fire.
flames. Yeah. Investigators still trying to work out what started that, but the buildings were undergoing these major renovations, speculation around the bamboo scaffolding, construction materials as well that apparently were wrapped around parts of those buildings, sort of like cloth and mesh and foam, are also highly flammable. What the investigators are saying is that probably helped to see these fires go up very quickly.
Yeah, you'd think that fire safety would be an absolute top priority in a place with that density of housing, but it seems that those materials may not have been compliant. Hong Kong's Secretary for Security noted that the mesh and the cloth on the outside of the building, which are meant to be fire resistant, burnt much more intensely than they should have, and, you know, everyone saw it.
Yeah, as it comes to who's responsible, police very quickly arrested 3 people on suspicion of manslaughter. They work for an engineering firm that was overseeing the renovations. They're suspected of gross negligence. That's the charge. It's expected that the disaster will lead to some sort of more strict regulations, as you point to, possibly a ban on that bamboo scaffolding.
Yeah, I heard residents of the complex told ABC's correspondent there that they'd had made complaints about some of the workers on that renovation standing on the bamboo scaffolding smoking. And so whether or not that played a part, we don't know, but plenty to investigate there.
Yeah, there sure is. And to finish this up, some really wonderful news. Really worthwhile pausing on this because I missed it. It wasn't until I sort of sat down and did a bit of a review of the news and was like, what? This has happened? So, yeah, good news. Australia is on track to become one of the first countries in the world to eliminate cervical cancer as a public health concern. just incredible. And it could happen in the next decade.
How good is that? And we've really led the way on this. There was a report out this week from the Centre for Research Excellence in Cervical Cancer Control that shows that rates continue to fall, survival rates are improving too. And the stat that you pointed out that really stands out is for the first time since records began in 1982, there were no cervical cancer cases diagnosed in women under 25.
None. It's extraordinary. And, of course, the reason behind that is that's the generation that has got the HPV vaccine as teenagers, and we're now seeing the results. So Australia, of course, was one of the first countries to roll out that vaccine 20 years ago. I was in the Health Minister's office when that vaccine got approved and got federal funding to start being rolled out. So really, just an incredible thing.
Yeah, I was luckily in that age group where I could still get it for free.
Into it.
Yeah, I think I must have been early 20s or something, so it was worth doing. The other development is the switch from pap smears to cervical screening a few years back. Just to explain that, the old pap smear looked for abnormal cells that had already changed, so sort of almost the pre-stages of cancer, whereas the new test looks for HPV, which is the virus that causes the cancer.
Exactly. And the self-collection option is also something that's really significant. So for cervical screening, it's made a huge difference, particularly for people who don't want a clinician to do a pap smear.
Fair
essentially,
enough.
You can do it yourself now. The report found that lots of women have taken that up, particularly from groups that have never really been screened at a significant rate, or rarely been screened at least.
Yeah, so particularly important for groups like Indigenous women, multicultural communities, women with disabilities, those in regional and remote areas, definitely makes it easier and more accessible, and that has shifted the numbers. I've used that option myself and it's so much easier than what it used to be.
And look, let this be a reminder, if you do need one, if it's time that you did a screen.
Put it in the diary, ladies.
Exactly. You need to pop into your GP or whatever health provider that you use. You can ask about the self-collection option if that works better for you. It's one of those things that's very easy to put off, but clearly it's very important, and screening does make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jodie, let's get into the week ahead with what's coming up. Today you might see some headlines on Put Australia First. These are rallies that are taking place in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. Those rallies are being organised by figures from that pandemic-era freedom movement. British far-right activist Tommy Robinson is also set to speak via a video link.
Yeah, Tommy Robinson, just a bit on him. He founded the Anti-Islam English Defence League and he was recently released from prison in the UK. Elon Musk backed his legal costs. These rallies follow the March for Australia protests in August and October. They drew thousands of people, but they also saw neo-Nazi groups turn up. And the organisers of these rallies say that those groups are not welcome.
Yeah, another speaker was going to be Jacinta Nampijinpa Price. She, of course, is the Liberal senator from the Northern Territory. She had been promoted there, but she pulled out this week. She said she had some personal commitments to attend to. Remember, of course, ASIO director Mike Burgess has said that these far-right groups, this activity in Australia is a rising problem. Expect some more commentary on that part.
Yeah, moving to tonight's AFLW Grand Final, it's the third year running that North Melbourne and Brisbane have faced off in this decider. This time it's at Icon Park at 7:45pm. The Kangaroos came out on top last year and they're on a 26-game winning streak.
Started early last season.
That's nuts.
Their winning streak. So
hard to beat.
Yeah, they're on quite a run. On Sunday, Melbourne's Metro Tunnel opens, 5 new underground stations. It's a decade after the project was first proposed. It kicks off free weekend public transport across Victoria until February the 1st.
Also Sunday, Pope Leo XIV arrives in Lebanon, fresh from his visit to Turkey. He'll be there at a tense time. Last Sunday, the IDF struck Beirut, killing senior Hezbollah operatives in the first strike on that capital in months. Hezbollah said that the attack crossed a red line.
Yeah, for the Pope's visit, though, he's visiting the site of that 2020 Beirut port explosion. Such a massive thing for that nation. It killed over 200 people and really decimated a major piece of infrastructure and big parts of that city. He's also set to reiterate calls for dialogue for peace in the Middle East.
Heading southeast for early Monday, Qatar hosts the second last Grand Prix of this year's F1 season at 3 a.m. AEDT, i.e. Sydney time.
Jodie is so exciting. This Grand Prix.
Will you be up for it?
Oh, wow. Oh, look, I don't want to, but I'll see how I'm feeling
if you
on
happen
Sunday.
to wake.
I know, 3 a.m. is very early. McLaren, of course, is really desperate to bounce back because Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, their two drivers, they were disqualified in Las Vegas. They're right at the front of the pack. Of course, Piastri is an Australian, as we say. That's why I'm really majorly interested. Lando Norris is leading the championship by 24 points. Piastri and Max Verstappen, they're tied for second. So it's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, sure is. Monday is also the official start of summer, December 1, and it's Cyber Monday for anyone chasing any deals. I'm sure there'll be a few. On Tuesday, the world's longest direct flight launches on China Eastern between Buenos Aires and Shanghai. It's 29 hours with a 2-hour fuel stop in Auckland. That's a long time on a plane.
Quick distinction about direct and non-stop. It's a direct flight, so they don't get off the plane. They just stop and refuel.
I'm not sure I was across that distinction.
Yeah, there's no plane that could fly 29 hours.
Without refuelling.
Exactly right.
In Canberra, Veterans Affairs Minister Matt Keogh addresses the National Press Club on Tuesday. That marks 12 months since the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide.
Yep, Wednesday we're up to. Communications Minister Annika Wells is at the National Press Club. She's going to be focusing on the social media ban for under 16s, December 10. That launch date is coming up pretty quickly. The ABS is also releasing its national accounts. Of course, that's the data, the quarterly data that points to how our economy is tracking.
Thursday, the second Ashes test gets underway at the Gabba, a day-night pink ball match. The first ball is at 2 p.m. Brisbane time. Australia wrapped up an 8-wicket win in Perth in just 2 days.
Yeah, that was quite something. Also on Thursday, Oprah Winfrey is kicking off her Australian speaking tour. It's her first visit to Australia for anything public anyway. She might have snuck into some sort of beautiful island somewhere for a holiday. I don't know. But in terms of an official visit, her first one in a decade, it's presented by the pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly. It's the maker of the weight loss drug Mounjaro.
It features moderated chats with the former Sunrise host, the lovely Melissa Doyle, on topics like resilience, authenticity, personal reinvention. She's doing one-night only shows in Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane and Melbourne. Tickets ranging from about $110 to over $400 for the premium ones. People really love Oprah, so I'm sure they sold like hotcakes.
They really do love Oprah. On Friday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he's hosting a visit from Russian President Vladimir Putin. It's his first visit to India in 4 years. There's been quite a trend in the last bit of time of India and Russia actually talking a lot. Trump's tariffs straining that US-India tie is quite a conversation. So, the pivot to other partners. Commentators see this really as India reinforcing its diversified partnerships.
And to wrap up, Lady Gaga's Mayhem Ball kicks off in Melbourne on Friday. It's her first Australian show in 11 years.
I'm going to her Sydney show. Can't wait for it.
Lucky you. Have you got a favourite Gaga song?
Paparazzi, I reckon it would be. There's a few, but I like that one.
I like Shallow. You know the one that she did with Bradley Cooper for A Star Is Born, that movie?
I think she helped write that one.
Yeah, I think
it's very different to her pop, isn't it?
Yeah, it's up my alley.
Yep, looking forward to that one. Squiz Recommends. I'm recommending an older, like a couple of years old, show, a comedy, short, Jodie, 29, 30-minute episodes. Somebody Somewhere. It's a lovely show about friendship, essentially. It's set in Kansas in a community about, a group of people who are quite different, but they find friendship. It's a really lovely watch. I really enjoyed it. It kept getting served to me in my algorithm, and for some reason I kept skipping past it. But if you do want something, if you've had that similar experience, I went, of course, on the deep dive going, why haven't I focused on this before? The reviews are extraordinary.
I like your in case you missed it recommendations because sometimes the pace is too fast. I can't keep up with all the newfangled stuff.
That is what it is.
And I miss things.
Thank
you. My recommendation this week is a book called The Names by Florence Knapp, Knapp.
Yep.
It's a bit like Sliding Doors. It follows 3 different versions of the one storyline in the context of a woman in an abusive marriage. It is a bit harrowing, so just you need to be in the headspace, but it goes along these storylines depending on what she decides to call her baby's son. So we get the story of Gordon, which was the name she was expected to give him, and you get the story of Julian, and you get the story of Bear, which was the name that her older daughter chose. And I just think it's so cleverly done and really takes you inside that kind of a dynamic if it's something that you don't really understand. That's my one this week.
I love those novels that have a different structure. Like they sort of come out, they're so different because the structure is so clever.
I would recommend reading it in one session. Unlike me, I sort of put it down for uni and I've picked it back up, which is slightly confusing. But
like one session as in one go, or you just
not one
you
go,
don't have
but
a break?
Don't have like a 9-week break.
The difference between direct and non-stop. Let's have a direct reading.
In book version. Thank
not
you.
Not necessarily a non-stop one.
Yeah, that's right.
That makes sense. Moving on to Squiz Press, just very quickly, I just wanted to mention we had a really, really great achievement from the Squiz Kids team this week in that we're now on YouTube Kids.
Ah, that's great.
Getting on YouTube Kids is quite an achievement.
Yeah.
It sounds like, you just tick a box in the algorithm and it just sort of sorts the content out. But no, you have to be verified, validated. The content is seen as safe. It's seen as suitable. It means that on YouTube, which we're doing a lot of YouTube stuff these days, dive on and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't. And Kids is its own specific channel as well. The content's great. The team, Christy and Bryce, do some really incredible things there. If you have kids or if you know of kids between that sort of 8 and 12-year-old age range, of course, they won't be able to sign up for an account, but you can get your account sorted and surface that sort of content. So
I think a lot of them would like to see the faces behind the voices.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's a whole other way of looking at it.
Yeah, and a big thanks to the YouTube team as well because, we're just so thrilled to be there. Also, you'll see that the Squiz Shortcuts series has started rolling out about that social media ban. First episode is out. We'll have another one next week with Bryce and Andrew talking about all of that. It's going to be a big talking point in the news in a couple of weeks, so get prepped on that, I reckon.
We all need to be across it.
Absolutely. I think that's us done for the week, Jodie. Thank you very much.
Closer to Christmas, Claire.
I know, we're getting there. It's December.
Start shopping.
Have a good weekend.
See you next week.